from the Penn Libraries.
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
My name is Tyreesha Tubb. I work down the hall in the media lab. And today I'm here to talk to you about this lovely website application thing called Duolingo. Have any of you ever heard of Duolingo before? Oh, cool. Have you used it?
50-day streak.
Hey, wow, that's really impressive. I get like to day 3, and then I always. That's very impressive.
I couldn't get a streak going until they had the mobile app.
The mobile app is awesome. Yeah, I use it on, jumping ahead here, I use it on my tablet and also on my phone when I'm just writing along on my stuff. So that's great. Yeah, so Duolingo is a language learning app and computer-based? Sure, computer-based website. And the reason that, or what sets it apart from most of the other ways we've been taught to learn language is this whole idea of gamification and gamifying how we learn language. So I'm just going to go through a couple of the aspects of the website, and then I'll show you all how a lesson works as well. And I'll just talk about why I think it's a nice additional thing that we can use to teach languages and to learn languages. Not necessarily on its own, but an additional thing.
Do you want to present it from your computer?
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Sorry, weird seeing myself.
Right.
Thank you. All right, I forgot I wasn't on the screen.
Could I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Is this something that is available to us through Penn, or is it freely available on
Oh,
the
it's
web?
free to everyone.
Okay.
Yeah. That's another thing that sets it apart from most of the language learning tools that we have now. It's free, completely free. There's no basic version versus a pro version or anything like that. Everyone who joins is using the same version, and that version is free, which is great. The applications and the web-based program. So when you start learning a language, and currently they have, I wrote down a list. They have English, Spanish, French, Italian, and Portuguese. And when you start learning a language, you'll see that your page, your dashboard, has this thing we call tree, a language tree. And it starts off on the left side with your basics, phrases, and it tries, or what they've done is they've tried to structure it in a way that you, as you progress, you're using a lot of the knowledge that you learned before. It's a cumulative learning structure as opposed to just learning new things that aren't necessarily connected to what you learned before. And so you build on what you learned, which is how we learn. We learn one word, and then we learn a phrase, and then we learn a sentence, and then we know how to make a paragraph. Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is really interesting about Duolingo and the way that they, or the reason that it started in the first place, is this guy, Luis von Ahn. And he is the one who, or he's one of the founders of this program, reCAPTCHA. Have y'all ever like gone to a website and then had to put in the CAPTCHA, that phrase on the image? Yeah. Those images that we see that we have to type in are usually taken from books that have been scanned in, and they're trying to, what's the word? Not transcribe.
Crowdsourcing.
Yes, exactly. It's like it's a multi-user cross-world experience of translating and transcribing millions of books. And they're doing it by using CAPTCHAs. So the way that they'll do it, because I think this is really cool, so I'm just going to write it over here very fast. So you'll get 2 of them, so you'll have 2 words side by side. Say the first one is book, and the second one is read. The first one is one that's already been, like, they're sure that that's the word. They're sure that the word is book because this X number of users have translated it this way. And then the second one, this is the word that's still being translated by X number of users, so they're not sure. But they'll choose what this word means based on when X number of users say what that word means. So I think that's very interesting. And this guy, Luis von Ahn, he used that same technique in his efforts to basically translate the internet into many different languages. The example that he often uses is that the Wikipedia pages, or the Wikipedia website for Spanish language is about 20% as full as that for English languages. So when you're working through Duolingo, and once you get to a point where you find that you can work through sentences and translate sentences and paragraphs effectively, you can do this thing called immersion. And in the immersion part of Duolingo, basically what you're doing is translating Wikipedia pages. And in the same way that they decide what a word is based on a scanned image by X number of users translating it that way, that's how they decide what these Wikipedia articles are saying based on X number of users translating it that way. So I think it's a really cool way to it's a cool way to get people involved in what they don't even realize they're involved in sometimes, which is, as I said, a cross-world translation of something. So, when you first start off with Duolingo, this is what you're going to see, your tree. Usually, if you are at the beginning, you'll see these locked levels. But because I've been working on it for some time, I've got my first 2 levels unlocked, and then I'm about to approach another exam to unlock my next level. As I said earlier, it's all about gamification and gamifying language learning. So another way they do this is by connecting it with social media and giving people a chance to sort of play against each other. Obviously, at the end of the day, you're all winners because you're all learning the language. But this is just a nice push. Like 2 of my brothers were both learning German, and they were both using Duolingo. So they were always like, oh, well, I'm on this level, I'm on this level, I have this many points, that sort of thing. Healthy competition, we hope. And here we have my progress. So, as you said earlier, you were on a 50-day streak. You can see that currently I am on a 0-day streak. Not the most impressive thing, but it's all about personal progress. And in the middle you have the words learned. And then Lingots, which is Duolingo currency, sort of like, for some reason the only comparison I can come up with is that website Neopets, where you like raised Neopets and then you had Neopet currency that you could use in the store. Fake currency, basically. Also at the bottom, you'll see lesson practice where you can strengthen your words. Over time, yes. So this is a list of the Spanish vocabulary that I've learned so far. And what Duolingo does is it keeps track of the last time that you use those words in lessons, so that over time, its algorithm figures out when you should practice certain words based on these bars, learning bars. So you'll see that through here, I haven't used this word in a long time, so they're saying that when I go back to my practice lessons and I practice my vocabulary, I know that this word's going to show up a lot, and a lot more than these two, because I use those all the time. So this is very helpful when I'm thinking about what words I need to practice translating and what words should go onto note cards as opposed to others. This is an example of what Duolingo looks like in their iOS app. I like it. I haven't had any problems with it yet, and they recently updated it for the iOS 7, which is also very pretty. And this is Duolingo on Android, which I do use with my tablet. And I mostly use Duolingo on my tablet, actually. And again, I've never had any issues with it. With the iOS app, there are certain things that are available offline, but with the Android app, nothing's available offline yet. So that one's available offline because, as you can see, it's not shaded out. So now, I just want to show you all Duolingo itself. Yeah, and this is a live website. We're just going to go back to lesson 1. So this is something that you might see when you first begin. And have any of you used Rosetta Stone? Or seen examples of Rosetta Stone? Yeah, so the idea of the image with the corresponding translation is a fairly simple structure that is effective.
La mujer.
When you select your answer, they'll always, there's the pronunciation guide that follows, and you check it, you're correct, and then you can continue on. But let's say I've chosen incorrect.
El hombre.
And then I check it, and it's wrong. So what you might have noticed is that up here in the corner, one of my 4 hearts have disappeared. If you've ever played a video game, then you might be familiar with the idea of your hearts equaling your lives. So what happens is...
El niño. Niño. El niño.
Wonder if it'll let me do it. Yeah, I will. So let's just keep
El niño.
being wrong. And our hearts are just slowly just
El niño.
Oh.
Un hombre.
So when you're out of all of your hearts, you have to go back to the beginning, which I think is probably one of the best parts about Duolingo. Because as I'm going through, if I'm going through quickly and I know I'm not really checking all my accent marks or checking all of my spelling and things like that, and I'm losing hearts, that makes me slow down automatically. As soon as I lose the first heart, I slow down. When I lose the second heart, I slow down even more, and I take my time, I check my work, I don't make mistakes. So I think this is a big part of gamification, which I haven't thought about as thoroughly yet. Negative repercussions and things like that. This is a big part of its gamifying language learning. The idea that when you get it right, you're winning something other than just learning the language or the language skill. When you get it wrong, you're losing something. Even if that something is just, it's just a small heart on the screen. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions so far?
So, like you were saying, it builds up to paragraphs. So, is there actually an opportunity? Because that was the thing that I used Mango for a little while, but
yeah.
You don't really. It's like conversation. You don't really get to write, which is to write.
Yes.
And
exactly.
And so this, you have the opportunity to actually sort of learn how to read the language as well as just saying hello.
Mm-hmm. So, as I said before, Wikipedia works in a similar way to the CAPTCHA system in that it takes things that are already on the internet and uses them to teach something, or in reference to the CAPTCHA system, to prove that you are a human and not a robot. The way that Duolingo does it is with Wikipedia pages. So for instance, if you're looking for an easy passage to practice translating, then you just select easier here. You could choose a category. It doesn't even have to be Wikipedia necessarily, just articles from around the internet. You can also choose an article that still needs things to be translated so that you can try to translate it yourself and then submit that to be checked over and things like that. And you can actively participate in the translation of the internet. Or if you really just want some practice and you don't want too much pressure, you can choose things that are already finished being translated and checked over. And then you can go into it. And the cool thing is, in the same way that it does when you're doing a lesson, and if you hover over something and you're not sure of the definition, you can find the definition easily. It does that here, word by word, so that if you really just need to know one word, you don't need the whole paragraph translated for you. You can do that, but you forget what miércoles is. Let's say. So yeah, it actively gives you chances to participate in the same amount or the same translation that those who are fluent in the language are doing, which is pretty exciting.
And does it do non-Roman scripts too, like Russian and?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But another cool thing about Duolingo is that they're constantly trying to add more things. And the way that they do that is through the community of the wider world.
Mm-hmm.
So in the incubator, this is where people go to contribute to courses if they're bilingual. And yeah, so soon, hopefully, that's their goal, is to have pretty much everything. And another thing that I like is that they have English specifically for folks who speak Turkish, English specifically for folks coming from Polish, because I don't think that everyone who speaks a language can learn English in the same way, or any other language in the same way. So this is why I really love their community sense in building these courses, because they really are focusing on the fact that people from around the world learn languages differently depending on what their language is, what the language is that they're coming from in the first place.
I noticed the topics there. So when you click on, for instance, food, does Duolingo then scan the internet for articles or essays that deal with food? Is that how that works?
I believe so. Let's check it out though, since we're here.
Or it already has them.
Right. already has or let's see. So let's say we choose food and yeah, that seems to be what happens.
And the text, so some of the texts are Spanish, they've been written in Spanish, and some of them have been translated from English into Spanish, is that it?
It's typically they're the ones that have already been written in Spanish and need to be translated into English.
I
So
see.
you don't yet have an English translation.
But the ones that you showed there that were scanned, they were in Spanish, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So it looks like it focuses on vocabulary
Mm-hmm.
rather than syntax or grammar. Like, I'm wondering how it handles idioms, things that are peculiar to
Yeah.
the
Yes.
source language.
Well, I think it does. It does definitely focus on syntax and grammar, especially as you progress. In level 1, basics 1, the focus is usually on vocabulary and things like soy
Mhm.
word. You know, I am this or I am that.
Uh-huh.
But then the one that I'm currently having trouble with, and I've gotten back to do it several times, are things like, yeah, possessives and plurals are usually the things that are tripping me up right now. So there's definitely a focus on the syntax and the grammar, but it builds upon the vocabulary that you've learned so that you're not just learning syntax and grammar rules and drilling things. Rather, you are using the syntax and grammar to translate things related to the vocabulary that you learned in those basic levels. But idioms. Yeah, idioms are hard.
I haven't run into very many.
No,
And
me
I've made it all
neither.
the way through the skill tree.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of really advanced stuff. When I do
Yeah.
translate articles, I hit the web a lot for Google Translate and dictionaries. But it's really good for up to like advanced intermediate,
Right.
I'd say. Because most of that you just need to drill and repeat and remember. And I got about 1,500 words to count. So 1,500 words that
That's a decent
I
vocabulary.
learned from the skill tree.
Mhm.
Can I ask another question? I really like the idea that it scans the internet and then brings up these texts that were related to the topics.
Mhm.
But do you know offhand if I'm sort of at the beginner level, does it scan for text that's only for beginners?
You can.
Then does it, if I progress to the intermediate level, then it scans the internet for text that would be designed mostly for the intermediate?
You mean in the immersion session? Immersion section?
Yeah.
You can choose the difficulty.
You can choose a difficulty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
Let's
if we-
see what harder looks like. Oh, yeah. The vocabulary is definitely more difficult.
Right.
Yeah.
And these are authentic texts written by people in the world that are Spanish speaking. That's really interesting.
I really like the Wikipedia articles.
Hmm.
Yeah. Any other questions? Let me see if I forgot to mention something.
Hamish, I'm not sure if you covered this already. Where does it keep track of how many words you've learned?
So if you go to your dashboard, right over here, you can also see the vocabulary you've learned and also what you've been losing if you haven't been practicing it over time.
Oh, I just look at that.
Here we go. Yes. It's basically, it doesn't spell out their algorithm, but if you use logic and common sense, then it's the longer it's been since you've practiced a word in a lesson, the more likely it is that you've forgotten that word. The longer it's been since you have to translate that word or use that word in a sentence. Frequency of use, that's the phrase I'm looking for. Yeah, Yes, but I really like Duolingo. I was never big on video games, but I did really like that game Math Blaster and also Reading Rabbit. I don't know if anyone knows. So I was very big on the home education games, and this goes along with that really well.
So, are you taking a course in Spanish and this strengthens it, or you're just learning it independently?
I'm learning it independently. I took Spanish 1 the fall semester of my freshman year, and it was at 8 a.m. every day.
Uh-huh.
So that didn't end very well. But then I studied Latin in high school and also in college, the last 2 years of college, and I found that, or the reason I wanted to take Spanish in the first place was because of the similarities between Latin, which is a language that I really love, and Spanish, because romance language, marriages, and things like that. So now I feel like I'm going back to Spanish, and by doing something like Duolingo with Spanish, I feel like it's helped me remember my Latin in also a logical way, because as I said, they're related, and I'm not studying Latin right now. It's just for fun.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.